Hi, this is the first show of 2024 at the Allegheny Highlands Arts and Crafts Center. It's a very special one. It's called Sibling Showcase because the work is by a brother and sister who grew up together, painted together a lot, but now live in different places and have come back together to do this show for us. The first part of the gallery is the work of Joel Tucker, who lives in Roanoke and in Florida. And this is Joel Tucker.
Hello.
Tell me a little bit about your work. I know you work in watercolor and you've been doing photography, and you say now you've gotten into acrylics.
I started out in watercolor in high school. Sister helped me a lot to keep me going as far as when I was a little boy. She used to take my artwork and hang it in her washroom. And she saved it for me. I still have pieces that I did when I was 10, 11, 12 years old that Shotzi saved for me. I started out in watercolor, and I kind of ventured into spontaneous photography. If I see something I like, I take a picture of it. It's nothing set up, it's all just spontaneous. So, and then I kind of got into the pen and ink aspect, and then I discovered acrylics, which do dry very fast, but I learned how to work with them. So I'm kind of doing more acrylics now than I do watercolors, but I like to go back and forth and then throw in a few pen and inks, and of course my crazy photography.
I want to talk about this one, about the rail yard with the cabooses a little bit, because I know that in part of your statement you say that that's sort of where you started with painting when you worked for the Chessie Systems. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about this piece.
I was actually working in the Clifton Forge yard, and I had a 35 millimeter camera, and I took this picture, and I just loved it, and I just loved the shadows, and so I painted the scene, and I've also painted scenes with the cabooses because when I worked on the railroad we had those, and then of course they got rid of them. But yeah, that was a lot of my inspiration was working on the railroad, and I've done many railroad scenes in Clifton Forge and Covington and Glen Welton because I like to do local art. Okay. And now it's kind of venturing out towards Florida, because I kind of hang out there half the year, so right. Florida kind of is catching my eye now with some of the artwork that I do. And
it was hiding behind the caboose just a second ago is downtown Glen Welton.
Yes, this is was my whole life from the age of when I was born until I was in my 20s. I lived in Glen Welton. I was the paper boy. I knew everything that went on in that town. So I had to paint several paintings of the town itself because it was such an important part of my life.
And you've got a couple of nice ones in the show about that, so they'll have to come and see the others as well.
Yeah.
So switching from Glen Welton to living in Roanoke, and now you say you live part-time in Florida, which I guess is the inspiration for the piece with the flamingos that's behind you.
Yes, actually this photograph was taken in the Dominican Republic, actually. Okay. But I was on a cruise, and they were selling those, and they were just all in the, like, standing up, and I thought that was kind of different. That's and great. Neat. And the pig picture, I took that picture a long time ago in Gatlinburg. It was raining that day, and they were selling them their piggy banks, and I just thought it was kind of cool the way they were all sitting on like bleachers, and I took that picture. I took several of those.
Well, that explains the plastic bags. I was wondering about the plastic bags.
With the water on them.
Yeah. Flamingos have had an impact on you, whether they're live or otherwise.
Right.
And so tell me about this barrel of yard art.
Well, this was actually, I was going through Lexington, and they had this little store that sold all these, and they were actually sitting out there in this barrel, and I took a photograph of it. And I don't think that store's there anymore, but it had the largest rattlesnake in the world in that building. But this is where the inspiration for this painting came from, is it was a photograph that I took in Lexington, of all places.
Talk a little bit about the fact that you do watercolor and the fact that you do photographs. So, and I put these two together because they're such a wonderful representation of how, I'm not sure which comes first, the watercolor or the photograph, but I like the idea that you changed them.
Well, actually this one, I was at a restaurant in Fort Lauderdale, and it was called Rosie's, and we were having lunch, and they have these lanterns hanging up there everywhere, and I thought, what is that up on this roof? And it was a big old lizard up there, iguana. So I took this photograph just, you know, as I was eating, and I liked it so much I thought I would try to do a watercolor of it, and this is my representation of that photograph. But I use a lot of photographs to do my artwork, as you can see with this one here. It's over there as a photograph as well, but that's kind of my inspiration, is my photography.
Okay, and now the other half of the Sibling Showcase is Gertrude White, who I'm probably going to call Shotzi, since that's the name I first met her by. You're Joel's oldest?
I'm the oldest and he's the youngest.
Okay, and so you started painting how?
Well, actually, I started painting because he was right out of high school and he wanted to take lessons. So he asked me if I'd like to go with him. And so I joined him, and we took art lessons from William R. Thompson. And he was a really good teacher.
In White Sulphur.
And,
Yeah,
well, he came to the Women's Club in Intervale, and so we took classes for years from him. And so I started out in oils. He always brought a model in, and we did portraits and things. And then I moved over to watercolors.
and cut loose.
And cut loose. Well, actually, I was really tight, but he told me I needed to get a bigger brush. So I got a bigger brush, and it did make a world of difference.
Okay. I wanted to be sure and feature these three on the back wall. I think one of your strongest points is your sense of, yes, they're realistic, but they're also sort of fantasy-like. When you paint flowers, it's obvious that you love them.
I do.
And I don't know whether or not you grow them, but I have this sense, particularly when I look at these three, and on a day when it's going to be minus something out there today, to walk into this gallery and have Joel's bold color and your green growing things is just such a lift to the spirit. In this one, I notice you've done not only watercolor, but you have some other things in here.
I have
that you've
collage.
incorporated.
I have, I dry flowers, and I love Queen Anne's lace, so I try to incorporate them every chance I get. And I have leaves. Some of those are real. And I just love bluebells, and I actually have transplanted some in my yard.
Oh, and they're so very rare.
And so they're, yes, and so
Okay.
I have my subject matter right whenever I want to do them over.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You've done the things that are out of your garden, but you've also done some more formal portrait-like pieces of your flowers. And we've got the Rose of Sharon, and then we've got this wonderful flower setup that you said you and Joel. Tell me the story about that one a little bit.
Well, we took classes with J.R. Shepherd from Millboro, and so she did that as a setup, and so we all painted that, you know, from her setup.
And I bet yours doesn't look anything at all like this one here.
So he did one and I did one, and so
Nice.
I didn't, it's been unframed all these years.
Well, I'm glad you fixed that.
And so I got it out and kind of doctored it up a little.
Great. And I also noticed that in, I don't know whether it's this one or this one, but there are a couple of pieces that you've actually incorporated butterflies that you've managed
Yes,
to find in the garden.
Yes, I do. I'll find butterflies that are dead, of course, and I like to incorporate them in my work.
Good. We've talked about your sense of realism, we've talked about your garden, but I know from talking to you off and on over the years that one of the things you really like is to go in the studio and go wild.
I do.
And so I love these two pieces. Can you tell me a little bit about them?
Well, that actually, I just did monoprints of different things. I have I save all these kind of things, the rug pad, and I just save these bits and pieces. I'll see something with a nice shape or something, and I'll save it. And so I just more or less it's a monoprint, and I just kept on putting it on there. And I actually gave that to Joel.
Rat. So tell me a little bit about what a monoprint is.
A monoprint is where you take your item, your lace or whatever, and you just paint it with watercolor or ink or whatever, and you just put it on your paper.
Okay.
And so you just layer it, you know, just keep layering things.
Now, I noticed in this one it looks like you've left some of the lace in there, but in other places you've painted the lace. And I
Right.
think it's kind of nice the way you switched from reality to paint and back again on those.
Yes.
And this one, I remember when you first brought this one out.
Well,
You were so excited, and you said you just kept telling me it was crazy, and I kept going, ooh, what's that?
well, I just love the colors. Believe it or not, as old as I am, I'm starting to really get some depth in my painting with my colors, and I just love that blue. And I had all these little pieces of handmade paper, and so I save every little piece. And my oldest son gave me a snake skin. He always finds me things. My family members do, and they bring me unusual things. So I kind of incorporated that in different places with my handmade paper. So I just had so much fun doing it.